I'd like to call this meeting, Town Council Committee of the Whole meeting to order. All councilors are present. And we have some special guests this evening. We have Troop 13G, the Boy Scouts, and they're here working on a merit badge. So if we could all please rise, and they would lead us in the pledge to the flag.
Don't forget to notice junked.
And Representative Dela Cruz is here as well, so thank you for coming out.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, gentlemen. Calendar and communications, Councilor Moravsik.
Nothing to report, other than the budget meetings that I attended.
Councilor Parker.
Budget meetings.
Councilor Franco.
I went to the RTM meeting for the school budget and attended a zoning meeting.
Councilor E.
I feel like I'm going after an overachiever. I've only done budget meetings this week.
Councilor Ober.
Budget meetings.
Budget?
Same.
Nothing.
Budget meetings and lots of talking to constituents. Approval of minutes, 2018-0091. Councilor Moravsik, would you move acceptance of the minutes, please?
(2018-0091) approval of minutes. Resolution accepting the committee of the whole meeting minutes. Resolved that the meeting minutes of the Town Council of the whole meeting of March 27th, 2018 are hereby accepted and approved. I so move.
Moved by Moravsik, seconded by Saperi. I have one change to the minutes. If you go to page 5, where it says what time the executive session ended, we were here long, but we weren't here that long. We ended at 10:30 p.m. and not a.m. Thank you. Are there any other corrections or additions to the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor of approval of the minutes 2018-0091 say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? So moved unanimously. Unfinished business, Mr. Manager, is there anything? Very good. So we're on to item number 6, new business. And the first item is 2018-0072 project labor agreements. And we have some guests this evening that wanted to talk to us about the building trades, working with the town of Groton, and Representative Dela Cruz is here to introduce them. Thank you for coming out, Representative Dela Cruz.
Thank you for having us. I just want to give you a little backdrop. Actually, I'm a member of Local Union 40, 30 years that I've been a part of this union, and really never worked in my own town other than if the job was at Pfizer or it was at Electric Boat here and there. But for the most part, I think what we've been told, while I was on all these school building committees, they just said, well, don't sign a project labor agreement. It's 15% higher. And I've heard that a lot, but I've also seen these folks' presentation. Jeremy's a member of my local, also a sheet metal worker, and I just thank you guys for listening, because I think you should always have all the information when you're voting. I was in that very same seat that you are just a year and a half ago, and I know how much time that it takes to do the job, and I appreciate you getting this on the agenda. So I'm just going to have these folks take it over, and if you have any questions, obviously I'm here for you.
Thank you. If you would just introduce yourselves, please.
Sure, my name is Keith Brothers. I'm president of the Norwich, Mill and Building and Construction Trades Council. I represent 12,000 construction workers over southeast and eastern Connecticut. I'm going to pass out a few things here. One's my business card. The other is you're going to hear us mention building trades. Some people really don't know what the building trades are or what we do, but this is a copy of our letterhead and one of my business cards. You can use it for notes, but the Building Trades Council consists of building trades unions that cover from excavation of the beginning of a contract or project right down to the final fit out of interior work. So each trade has an autonomy that we do. So I just want everybody to have something in front of them that they could reference.
Mr. Brothers, if you would hold off on any of your speaking until you get to a microphone, it's because we're being recorded, and we can hear you fine here, but they can't hear you at home.
I'll sing while he's handing those things out.
Thank you.
What do you guys want to hear? Anything good? Oh, Sweet Caroline?
There you go.
Interactive song.
Okay, so the sheet you have in front of you, is a letterhead from the building trades of Norwich, New London. So when we reference building trades, the trades on the left of the communication are the trades that we're referencing, from the Boilermaker down to the Teamster. So project labor agreements consist of a pre-hire agreement that is been between the Building Trades Council in that area, this area would actually be Norwich, New London, and the owner of the project. Now, the owner could be DOT of the state of Connecticut, Mohegan Sun, Foxwoods, whoever the owner is. In this case, it would be the town of Groton, and whoever you hire to do your management work, construction manager, general contractor, for this project. So that's who the pre-hire agreement is between. So it sets conditions, sets holidays, work rules. One of the biggest selling points to an owner, a city or a town or municipality, is it sets standards for local hiring, veterans hiring, things that are very, very instrumental in getting the community involved in the project. So Jeremy's going to do a presentation. We'll do some Q&A after that, and I'll hand it over to Jeremy.
Good evening, everybody. First of all, thank you all for having us. We really appreciate it. It's not often that we get to do a full presentation on TV, so that's pretty exciting for me. I'm Jeremy Zedike. I'm the business rep for the Sheet Metal Workers Local 40. We cover 2/3 of Connecticut. Sheet metal workers do duct work, and we do roofing and gutters and things like that. And on that note, I also use a lot of acronyms and probably say a lot of things that are very familiar to me. So if at any time you're completely out of the water here and you just want to stop me and say, what does that mean? Please do, because I don't want you to be lost, okay? I came to Groton in 1999 from the Midwest. I was just talking to your town manager about that. I came from a rural part of Illinois, was just coming off of a plane into the New London airport there, and I drove down and I thought, wow, Groton's a metropolis. This is great. I was going into my first duty station here in Groton. I was a submariner for 5 years. I was on the USS Pittsburgh. We did 2 deployments while I was there. Got out 2005 and joined Sheet Metal Workers, and I have not looked back since. Although if you probably are familiar with the acronym Navy, Never Again Volunteer Yourself, I don't listen real well. Years ago, I volunteered to put together a presentation for project labor agreements, and I have not yet been able to find anyone else to do it, so here I am again. Anyway, what we hope to do tonight is to separate the opinions and myths from facts. And like Keith was saying, there's a lot of things you hear about project labor agreements or may have heard already, and I like to bring up this quote from Senator Moynihan. Everyone is entitled to their own opinion, but not their own facts. And that's what we are going to try to do, is to try to present you with the facts and even show you what some of the opinions are and try to bounce those off of each other. And to do that, we need to really understand what it is that we're here to talk about. So what is a PLA? I'm going to say PLA probably a million times, Project Labor Agreement. It's a very simple thing, like Keith said. It's a pre-hire agreement between the building owner, municipality in this case, and a building trades council, specifically the New London Norwich Council. And it just specified just wages, work conditions, and hiring goals for workers. Put very simply, it's a bunch of collectively bargained people collectively bargaining as a group with a municipality. And we are sort of relaxing some of our rules and standardizing some of our own rules to make it a very simple process so that we're all working under the same holidays, work hours, and basic conditions. The wages in this case are going to be under prevailing wages, which is state mandated, so that doesn't really apply. But it gives access to apprenticeship programs as well. It guarantees the owner and municipality an available pool of skilled and qualified workers for a given project. That is just exactly that. We open up our hiring halls to anybody that wants to sign on to the project labor agreement for just this one project. We don't tie your hands any other time. It's just this one project. We open up our hiring halls, which we would normally keep pretty, close to the vest because we train our people. We don't want to give them to everybody. But in this case, we're making an exception. We're going to open up our hiring halls. And it is the only way that municipalities can ensure that their residents will work on the project without investing major resources into an ordinance or monitoring system. Some of the larger cities like Bridgeport, Hartford, New Haven, they have pretty big staff. They can set up people, they can put in place ordinances that say this is how we're going to handle our construction, and they can have people go out and monitor it. Smaller municipalities or ones that just don't really have that sort of emphasis, they don't, and we do a lot of that work for them in this process. And it is the only way that municipalities can ensure their residents entering into a trade on these projects are given career opportunities and not just a short-term job. A good example of that is Waterbury. They set up an ordinance system, and they have a bit of a training program that they've modeled after ours, and they send out workers to projects, and then those workers come right back to them, and they never advance in their career. It's just a short-term job. What we do is we bring them into our program, whether they're apprentices or journeymen. We'll bring them into our programs. We'll get them back up to the skill level that we need to be, and they'll stay with us until they decide to leave or not. Like Joe said, he's been with us 30 years. I've been with the local for 14. Specific language in the PLA allows non-union workers the ability to perform work on the project without joining a union, and that's very important. It's federal and state law already, but we emphasize that heavily in our project labor agreements. Some of the myths that you hear about project labor agreements, and I like to call them myths, not lies. They're myths. You probably have heard a lot of these already, such as that they increase costs and decrease competition. Sometimes they'll say those two things go hand in hand. If you've got less competition, you've got higher costs. That's one of the things that you'll hear. That they require workers to join a union. We already talked a little bit about that. Non-union contractors that make up 80% or more of the industry, and their workers are just as well trained. Residency, apprentice, and minority requirements can be achieved by non-PLA projects. They're saying that we can do that, we don't need this. We can do that without it. And that local contractors cannot, important word, cannot work on projects. Okay? These are false. And where do these myths come from? Well, predominantly, they come from a group called the Associated Builders and Contractors. If you're not familiar with them, I'm sure after tonight's presentation you will become familiar with them, as they'll jump right on this. They typically send out letters like this. In this case, it was a Killingly Town Council letter. It was back in 2007. They were doing the same thing you guys are doing. You're looking to build a project. In this case, it was a high school. They were sent a letter, and it said a lot of things. One of them, it says it prevents any non-union worker from working on it, and that contractors will be forced to decide not to bid, and that there'll be a drastic increase in price, and that employment of local workers can be done without a PLA. So what I'd like to do is try to break these down just a little bit, each one of them. So we'll start with the first myth, that they increase costs and decrease competition by excluding contractors. Where do they get this? What's the basis for this myth? Prior to 2003, but we're going to stick with 2003. This was the second go-around of a study that they commissioned through a group called Beacon Hill Institute that was partnered up with Suffolk University out of Massachusetts. It was commissioned by an anti-PLA group. And they used a very basic model for how they were going to prove that PLAs cost more money. They used a square foot per dollar cost. What they did not include was the complexity of one job to another, where in the state one project was done versus another. There's a big difference between Pioneer Valley and downtown Boston. If you're renovating a project that's got a lot of brick and mortar, or if you're just putting up a brand new project with a flat foundation, there's a whole lot of difference between, even a single story or two-story project. They didn't account for any of that. And they also used estimated costs and not final costs. So if you estimate a project to be this value, they would say, okay, well, that's per square foot. But we all know that things change during construction. There'll be, positives and negatives. They'll take away square footage, you'll add square footage. They never factored any of these things in. So at the end of their study, they determined that PLA projects add an estimated $18.83 per square foot, which is almost a 14% increased cost over project labor agreements. Now that sounds very scary, and they've been beating this drum consistently. And you'll hear 15, 20, 30%. It's just over and over and over again. And it's effective. You keep saying a lie enough, it becomes the truth, right? Well, the reality is labor costs on a project are typically only 30% of a total project's cost. Now, I'm being a little fuzzy with the math because the other 70% being materials, there's also profit and overhead and things like that, management costs and whatnot. But the 30% is pretty locked in with labor costs, okay? Just for baseline, to get a 10% increase or decrease in cost, labor costs would have to be reduced themselves by 33%. All right, so that's a pretty large drop just to get a 10% savings, let alone a 20 or 30% savings. At that point, workers are working for free, and if that's the case, we got bigger problems. Large-scale municipal projects are subject to prevailing rate wages. And does everyone know what prevailing wage is, or prevailing wages rather? I'm getting a lot of blanks. I don't know if that's yeses or nos.
Why don't you briefly explain?
Sure. Prevailing wages are a federal guideline under Davis-Bacon Act. The federal government goes around and they do a study. It's a voluntary submission. Contractors will say how much they pay their workers on what projects. They will determine what is the prevailing wage in the area. And that is what they set as the floor. You can pay more, but you can't pay less on federal projects. The state, our state, adopted a mini Davis-Bacon Act, which means that we are going to look at whatever the federal says and say we also will make, contractors will pay a minimum wage of X for a different craft. So prevailing wage means that the floor has been set. You can only pay more, you can't pay less. And in Connecticut, prevailing wages are based on the union scale, predominantly.
So each craft on that letterhead that I gave you has a wage through the state of Connecticut. The CM, or your general contractor that you hire to build your project, every week goes through a certified payroll system. So each contractor on that job submits a certified payroll breaking down the workers he has on the job, what trade autonomy they are, and there's a rate and a fringe package attached to that, which becomes their gross wage. And that's what the certified payrolls consist of, and that's what prevailing wage is.
So on that note, being that it is a prevailing wage project, the labor costs are fixed. So in order to get a 10, 20, or 30% increase in price, it's not coming from labor. Just as a point of focus, Beacon Hill Institute, I mentioned they were with Suffolk University. They parted ways in 2015 when it was revealed that they were a predominantly funded through ALEC and the Koch brothers network. So you kind of already know what their viewpoint on life is at that point. And that segues into a point that was made by a city councilor in Merritt one time when we were doing one of these, and he said, "Show me who paid for the study, and I'll tell you without looking at the paper what their conclusion was." And I just would like you to just keep that in mind a little bit as we go through a little bit more. The other studies that they conveniently ignore, one of them was looking at the Beacon Hill study, and it was done by the Michigan State and the University of Tennessee together. They wanted to look at that methodology of the first study, and they broke it down a little bit and found that it was quite flawed for the reasons that I explained earlier. And their conclusion was, we do not find evidence that the presence of a project labor agreement increases school construction costs. In 2004, somebody decided to look at both the studies and sort of critique them both and say, where did they come up short and where did they do it right? And they said the researchers did not control for important variables that could affect project costs. Clearly, other factors also influenced the cost of construction. The presence of a PLA did not have a statistically significant effect on project costs. And PLAs are cost neutral. They neither lower construction costs nor do they raise such costs. Electri International did a study in 2007. Their principal findings showed our research on bidding behavior and costs find that PLA neither decrease the number of bidders on a project nor increase or decrease the project cost when other important variables are taken into account. Cornell University, a highly respected university, in 2009 also looked at this issue, and they were looking primarily in the state of New York. And they found there is no evidence to support the claims that project labor agreements either limit the pool of bidders or drive up actual construction costs. And that public sector PLAs are not union-only agreements. Now, I didn't mention that as a myth, but it is kind of one of them out there that they say these are union-only. They're not. This is my favorite study of all for right now. I haven't seen any more recent ones, but in 2011, San Diego had Unified District. They had a district-wide they call it a PSA, but it's a project labor agreement. And one of the members of that was overseeing it was absolutely against the idea and was so vocal about it, they said, all right, fine. You commission a study, you pick who you want to do it, and then we'll release the findings, and everybody walked away. And I just want to go back to the point I made earlier about you show me who paid for the study, and I'll show you what the conclusion was. Well, after that was done, the conclusion was there has been no increase to the cost of winning bids for school construction projects, and the project completion time is faster and allows the district to experience less overhead. After that was all said and done, the fellow that was objected to it, Mr. Barnett, objected strenuously to the PSA that was in place. He therefore requested the study and subsequently selected the research team of Ree and Parker Research. And he had come out and say, but very publicly, the facts are clear. The PSA is good for taxpayers in San Diego. There has not been any increase in construction costs before the PSA to after the PSA. All right, we beat that one up enough. Let's talk about another myth. PLAs require workers to join a union. I already sort of mentioned that state law and federal law already preclude that. But for emphasis, these are pages of the PLA or a PLA that you could use. And state law mandates that a lot of these things be entered into the PLA. So most of the stuff you'll see. Ensuring a reliable source of skilled and experienced labor, whether unionized or non-unionized. And then we also say the contractor shall have the right to determine the competency of all employees. The contractor shall also have the right to reject any applicant referred by the local union. There shall be no discrimination against any employee or applicant for employment because of his or her membership or non-membership in the union. And that the unions will refer qualified applicants pursuant to a non-discriminatory job referral procedure. And lastly, they shall permit a reasonable number of key men to be brought with a contractor referred through the union halls in a non-discriminatory manner as required by law. And for added emphasis, some years ago, a bill was passed in the state, and it states that any project labor agreement required by a public entity pursuant to this section shall invite all contractors to bid on the project without regard to whether the employees of any such contractor are members of a labor organization. And another thing that's hard to read on the screen here, but it's right here, section B. It says a public entity's decision to require a project labor agreement shall not be evidence of fraud, corruption, or favoritism. There was a lawsuit brought against the building trades many years ago in Hartford that claimed all of those things. And so what they wanted to do when they passed this law was to make it very clear that it does not show fraud, corruption, or favoritism. So that fear of being sued on those grounds is moot. And any project labor agreement required by the public entity pursuant to this section shall not require compulsory labor organization membership of employees working on the project. Another myth that you might have heard, non-union contractors make up 80% plus of the industry and their workers are just as well trained. Now, it's no secret that number of unionized people in this country has dropped significantly over the years. 80% is a bit of a stretch. I will concede that point if you're going to count every person that has a licensed contractor, a home improvement contractor, a van, pretends to be a contractor at night, maybe 80%, but we're not talking about that sort of thing. Department of Administrative Services pre-qualifies contractors to do large state projects like public schools. There are over 425 DAS pre-qualified contractors who are union affiliates or have worked on project labor agreements. The Connecticut ABC, who is, the reason I bring them up is because they're the largest grouping of non-union contractors. They represent only 71 DAS pre-qualified contractors. Any of these contractors may bid on these projects if they comply with the bid requirements. One of the big ones that you might have heard of is United Steel. They're an ABC affiliate. They're a non-union company predominantly, but they bid on a tremendous amount of project labor agreements. They do a lot of work with us. Also, my own trade, we do a lot of work with kitchen equipment contractors. We install the kitchen equipment for them. They don't sign contracts with us other than the project labor agreement, and we work very harmoniously with them. We allow them to bring supervisors in and help us out, and we do the job. It works very well. As far as a qualified labor source, the national average of apprenticeship completion rates from 2005 to 2014, this is based off federal data, shows a completion rate of 45% and a termination rate of 40.5%. What do those numbers really mean? Well, compared to the building trades, the Connecticut State building trades, all 13 of our building trades have their own apprenticeship program covering all contractors. Some of their completion rates are the glazers are at 91.5%, painters are at 86%, ironworkers are at 60% and 68%. There's two different locals. My own local is really lagging behind. We've got to do better, 54%. Carpenters are at 85%, operating engineers around 60%, electricians, two locals, 88% and 86%. Some of the facilities that we train in, and these are dedicated training resources. These aren't offices included. The numbers that, I mean, there are offices in this particular building, but the dedicated training space for this particular one is 10,000 square feet, and that's the Ironworkers 424. My own local, we have 10,000 square feet of dedicated training space. They have moved since this, but the Ironworkers had 14,000 square feet. It's bigger now. Our smallest local has 1,200 square feet. They're the insulators. The Connecticut Carpenters have 20,000 square feet, and they are renovating theirs as we speak. The Electricians Local 90 has 22,000 square feet of training space. Operating engineers have 20,000 square feet of classroom space and about 5 acres, probably more, of space, and they're looking to increase that because they're just outgrowing it. Plumbers and pipe fitters have 32,000 square feet, although they have added probably close to double that, a building. If you drive up 91, you can see that building. The Connecticut laborers have a district council training center in Pomfret Center, and I believe it's 100 acres. It could be more or less. It's a big facility. For comparison, completion rates of the Connecticut ABC, again, one of the largest opponents of PLAs, only 37 of their 71 contractors actually have an apprenticeship program registered with the state. Therefore, only 37 of them have the ability to bring on apprentices. The other ones cannot legally bring on apprentices. Their average completion rate is 22%, so half the national average. Of the 1,391 enrolled apprentices, and I say enrolled because a lot of times they don't enroll, they classify them as something else to keep them from being enrolled, only 257 have completed. The company with the highest completion rate, the one they could point to and say that's our best, 36%, still under the national average. And this one really shocks me. 25% of the companies have never completed an apprentice within the 10-year period that we looked at, never completed an apprentice. So they bring them on, but they never complete them. And I'm not trying to knock their facility. Training is important, but I want to just contrast it. They have two 24 by 24 classrooms, no hands-on training space. And it's roughly 1,150 square feet, so they're trying to do all the different trades. Our smallest trade has a bigger facility than they do. Another myth, residency, apprentice, and minority requirements can be achieved on non-PLA projects. And local contracts and their local employees will be excluded from PLA projects. A few examples that we have, Glastonbury Elementary Magnet School, they did not use a project labor agreement. We collected data on 26,000 plus man hours. They had roughly 18% minority hours, 5.5% of apprenticeship hours, resident hours equated to 3.6%, so hardly any. And three workers of 163 were actually from Glastonbury. And if we had a project labor agreement, you could see where the numbers should have been. And we could have put approximately 50 Glastonbury residents on that project. West Bristol reported significantly more hours, 118,000. 11% minority, 10% apprentice, 14% resident. And we talk about lost wages to the city. It equates to about almost $1 million worth of lost wages that the city could have paid to residents that they chose to pay to non-residents, and could have employed 13 full-time workers from Bristol. And construction isn't a full-time job predominantly on one project, but you get the idea. Had there been a project labor agreement, you can see where those hours should have been. Forestville K, very similar story, 14% minorities, 13% apprentices, 9% residents, 9% out-of-state workers. So those dollars didn't even stay in a neighborhood close to you. It's gone. You're never going to get those back. And that equated to about almost $2 million in wages and benefits lost to Bristol. So they paid it out of tax dollars, they never recouped it back. And it could have put about 25 full-time Bristol workers to get to work, and there you see the numbers that could have been. Wilcox Tech in Merritt, this is a pretty interesting case study. 208,000 man-hours reported. The sign reported over 300,000 hours, so I'm not sure where the 100,000 hours went, but they didn't show up on the certified payrolls. And if you're not familiar with certified payrolls, we talked about the Davis-Bacon Act. Certified payrolls are a function of that. It's the owner swears that what they're putting on the paper is true, and it lists all the workers that were working, all the hours that they worked for every day of the week, and all the wages that were paid to them on that job and any other job through the week. So I'm not sure how they missed 100,000 hours. It's pretty significant. They did have 20% minority hours. Apprentice hours were a little low, 9.5%. Resident hours, this one's scary, 1.3%. They almost didn't have anybody. They had more out-of-state hours than they had residents from Merritt. Pretty sad. 21 of 765 workers were from Merritt. And had they used a project labor agreement, you could see where they could have been. That equates to over $3 million in wages and benefits lost to the city on that project. So the reality is any contractor can bid this work, including qualified local contractors. And I say qualified, we talked about the Department of Administrative Services, and you're going to more than likely hire a construction manager to determine competency. PLAs offer minority contractors more opportunities to bid packages due to more stringent contractor participation requirements. If negotiated into the project labor agreement, we can all agree that we're going to split packages up in a more equitable fashion and that we're going to give minority contractors an opportunity to bid them. CHRO does a pretty good job, we can do better. In Bristol, one of the projects that we talked about, one of the bid packages was pretty sizable and it went to a local contractor. And Bristol pointed to that and said, hooray, we got a win. The contractor and another resident were the only two workers from Bristol that worked on that bid package. The rest of it was either not Bristol workers or the majority of it was subcontracted further down to another out-of-city contractor. So it equated to only 3% of the man-hours coming from Bristol. So it was a pretty significant site package. So the point of that is local contractors do not necessarily equal local workers. And that's really what we're here to talk about, is putting local workers to work on taxpayer-funded projects that we have some control over in Groton. And again, I like to bring up, everyone is entitled to their own opinion, but not their own facts. Killingly, after hearing both sides of the argument, decided to utilize a PLA on their high school project. And at the end of that, they wrote a letter to the building trades. Actually, Mr. Brothers right here.
Have I been here that long?
You have been here that long. They reported this. We didn't do this. They reported it. 387,000 plus man hours were worked on the project. 61% of the apprentice hours from Windham County came from Windham County, and Killingly residents made up 56,000 hours. Now, this was a little bit of an interesting. Killingly's a little bit rural. They decided to go with 15% of Killingly worker hours and 30% from the surrounding county. And that's just the way they decided to chop it up, and it worked out very well. Windham County residents, 134,860 hours. So a very significant chunk. And he said, local employment goals have been a win-win situation. This came from the town manager of Killingly. Bottom line, bitterness of poor quality remains long after the sweetness of low price is forgotten. You know, you have the opportunity to put something in place that can make a significant impact on residents in the town. You know, it's worth doing. So what can project labor agreements do for municipalities? Well, I like this term, transfer of wealth from resident wages back to the community. Right? We talked about the lost wages. Let's talk about what we can keep here. That's real wealth. That's mortgage payments. That's childcare. That's groceries. That's all those things that keep people where you want them to be. It also provides a high level of civic pride and project oversight by residents. I like to say this a lot. Who better to build the school that their children and grandchildren are going to than the grandparents and the parents, right? You're going to take the time. You're going to make sure it's right. You're not going to bury something in the wall. And you're going to ensure residents' work opportunities in the communities that they pay taxes in. Career opportunities for residents, minorities, women, and veterans. We spoke about the state law that was passed. It mandates that certain goals have to be in place. Residents are an option, but that's one that we push very heavily. But minorities, women, and veterans have to be in that project labor agreement for a goal. And it reduces state and local compliance agency burdens. What does that mean? Well, it means unnecessary delays and state and local burdens, right? The Department of Labor, if you are not following the rules, if you're not paying prevailing wages, if you don't have workman's comp insurance for your workers, which is, believe it or not uncommon, they will issue a stop work order. Stop the job dead until the issues are fixed. And they target, I don't want to say target, they stop the work of the entire project until they can determine who is responsible. Once they determine who's responsible, they stop that contractor or contractors from continuing to work until they correct their deficiencies. So if they're a big player in the project, or if they're the first player in the project, you're going to have a delay, and it could take some time before they get that sorted out. So here's an example of a stop work order in South Windsor. There was 3 of them issued. They stopped a project dead. They were trying to do a track project, I believe. They were trying to redo their track. Didn't work out. Here you can see 2 of those were posted, and this is the general contractor that was hired to do the job, and he was very concerned about these 2 stop work orders, as you can imagine. So he stopped and he took a picture, and mind you, he's wearing an Arco Safe shirt, and they're being hit for violations for not carrying workman's comp on their workers and misclassifying them as independent contractors. So I'm not sure safety was a real key. Then we lost the stop work orders. We couldn't find them. They were so worried about them that they decided to cover them up with a porta potty. It's just disrespectful. You're disrespecting your workers, and you're disrespecting the system that's trying to protect those workers. Those kinds of things won't happen on project labor agreements because we vet the contractors. We help you. We make sure that they're protecting the workers that we're sending them. So in Groton, just for some context, there's over 240 qualified building trades craftsmen that live in Groton proper. There's over 2,400 qualified building trades craftsmen in New London County. So there's a very large pool to draw from. The construction industry as a whole is still experiencing pretty high employment right now. That leaves many skilled workers looking for work right here. And high school and technical schools graduate valuable apprentice candidates every year. A PLA would offer career opportunities, and I want to bring that up again. The city of Merritt, we did a project that was about a 4-year project with 2 high schools. Some of those apprentices that started that job were hired specifically did their entire apprenticeship at the school that they probably went to, finished their time, became journeymen. In our case, we graduated them and they were able to attain their licenses, and now they have the ability to work in our field for the rest of their career if they choose to. So when given the facts, a lot of people, when we sit down with them, we discuss this, they choose to go with project labor agreement. Here's a list of 7 pages of listings from various different places. Some of them are large corporations, Yale University, Hamden, New London has done a few, you name it. The list is here, it's online, we don't hide it, in fact, we love it. North Haven High School is on here, and then they also decided to do their middle school. West Haven they're doing their high school now, and you can see Yale's on there a lot. Recent additions that didn't make the list: North Haven Middle School I talked about, residential colleges, Sterling Chemistry Lab, Wright Nuclear, Beinecke, Hendry Hall, Baker Hall, the Science Building, Pratt & Whitney did 3, West Haven High School, Bridgeport Central High, Bridgeport Harding High, New Haven Academy, New Haven Easums, New Haven Strong School, Yukon Stores did 3, at least 3, probably more now. Yukon Hospital did 5, Oxford Power Plant, Brantford Walsh School was probably the most recent one. Yale Peabody Museum and Yale 420 York Street are being negotiated as we speak. Brantford Walsh School rather, was the construction manager that had been hired actually advocated for it and said, I need this project labor agreement to get this thing on time and on budget. Veteran opportunities, this is something that's near and dear to my heart. I told you I was in the Navy. I registered for Helmets to Hard Hats. It's a program that's brought in over 663 returning vets for careers just in Connecticut. I signed up for the program. They matched my skills, which I didn't think I had any to speak of. I was a sonar technician. I thought, what am I going to do? What civilian job is out there looking for whales and ships? It turns out that there was a aspect of sheet metal work that does testing and balancing that took all the formulas that I learned on how sound travels through water and applied that to how air travels through ductwork. It was amazing. I was able to take they found that skill set for me and said, here you go, why don't you go join these guys? And I did, and I had a successful career. I ended up winning an international contest for it, as a matter of fact. Many, like myself, have already entered a trade career. Many more are simply waiting for an opportunity to begin. And PLAs have to set goals, and we love these goals, of hiring veterans for these projects, right? We want them to be proud that they're there and you know, giving them an opportunity to really use their hands, and that's just something I'm really, really proud of. A recent success story, I talked about the Merritt High Schools. It was a nasty battle, I'll be honest with you. There was a lot of groups out there that were saying that we're gonna run this thing over budget and it's gonna be the worst. 2 schools at one time, you know, we set a pretty aggressive goal. We said we're gonna put 30% residents to work on the 2 projects. Honestly, we missed the mark. We got 20%, which was still very good, compared to the 1.3% on the high school that was the 3rd high school in town. And we did not run it over budget. In fact, there was a surplus. On one school, it was $1.9 million, and another school was just under $400,000. What they've decided to do with that excess funds is fund a study to repair the tracks for the 2 schools, and they're ultimately going to use part of that funding to fix those tracks. So they got more than they expected out of the project, and they got a lot of people to work. In fact, the 465,000 man hours, and believe me, I know they're there because I went through these numbers myself. The wages totaled $25 million in total wages. It was this particular project was about $110 million. So remember, we talked about 30% of the project being wages. This was actually just about 25%. So that stands pretty correct. So that's the total wages and benefits earned. On the project, 97,000, just under 98,000 were resident hours, 21% of those hours, which totaled $5 million in Merritt wages and benefits. And remember, we did 2 schools at the exact same time. So the city of Merritt, and they were virtually the same school. They were mirror images of each other. So the city of Merritt was able to recoup of the about $50 million in labor costs. About $10 million of that stayed in the city. There was 129 Merritt residents on that project, and 111 Merritt residents entered the membership for the project. So we saw the project coming. We looked at our roles, and we said we have plenty of members, but we need more. We want more apprentices and things like that. So we went out and aggressively recruited, and we brought in members, new members. We brought them in. We started them in apprenticeships. They worked on the projects. Some of them didn't make it to the project. They were scooped up by another contractor because they were qualified candidates, good candidates, and they never saw the job, but they came because of that job. 41 Merritt apprentices worked on that project. As I like to say, PLAs, they're the best return on your tax investment. They really are. And that's all I have. I welcome any questions.
Thank you
for
very
your time.
much. Do any of the counselors have questions?
I feel a lot more informed. Thank you very much.
You told us about the veterans that have come into the union system. What about women? Are they actually becoming members?
Yes. As a matter of fact, there's a thing called workforce investment boards that the state funds through a federal grant primarily, and they're broken up into different regions. There's one here in the Groton, New London area. We saw what we used to use them quite a bit, and we would they would help recruit people for us. But we saw that the funding was going down and down and down, and they were doing less and less with their dollars. So we actually decided, as the building trades, to create our own sort of workforce investment board. It's a recruiting tool that is focused on women in the trades. So we've put in 3, 4, 5 classes maybe by now of women that we give, we get them very limited skills, some hand skills and things like that, and assess them and get them, make sure that they're where they need to be in life to, get a car and all these things, and have them job ready. And we then, once they graduate from our class, we present them to the different trades, and any of them that are looking, they grab them. And we have, in my trade, we have about 340 or so total members, and we've got, gosh, now probably 15 or 20 different women that we brought in just from those programs. And it's a very successful program, and we're very proud of that.
Counselor Zafari?
You have a program for bringing injured workers back on limited duty.
I'm not sure I understand what you mean by limited duty.
Well, frequently people go out of work and they're told they can't come back unless they're fit for full work. You have to have a program to make work available for people who can't do the full job, people who can't climb ladders, people who can't lift more than 15 to 20 pounds. If you leave it open to full work or nothing, you're going to isolate those people out of work for a long period of time. I'm wondering if your council has addressed the issue of limited work and getting people back to work with injuries.
Well, yeah, that's a very good question. Basically, the short answer of that is when the doctor says they're ready, they're ready. But in the meantime, if they've got something that's stopping them from being fully ready, we have other aspects of our trade that are not as physical as others, and they can certainly, through our retraining programs, we have what we call journeyman upgrade programs. They can be introduced to other facets of the trade. For instance, in my field, there's drafting, there's project estimation, there's testing and balancing, which is not quite as physical.
What I'm hearing from you is you really have not addressed the issue of bringing people back to limited work.
It's a dangerous thing.
You have alternatives for retraining, but you don't have plans for offering limited work. Your trades council, which means you have multiple smaller unions in the council. And does someone who leaves one trade and go to another lose, for instance, if painters have limited work available, but the carpenters do not, does a carpenter that goes over to take some of the light work in the painters union lose his benefits and his seniority in the carpenters union by making that switch?
First of all, we do not have seniority. That's another myth that I didn't really explore, but we do not have seniority in the building trades. It's all contractor gets to pick.
Well, I'm familiar with working with the concept in the metal trades here in Groton, but those are things that we've had to work with. All right, so you don't have, it's something that perhaps you ought to look at, because people out of work suffer more because they're out of work than they did from the original injury. And you ought to find a way to get them back in.
The workers' comp laws changed about a dozen years ago. We used to be able to bring back members on light duty, but when workers' comp changed, there is no light duty. Someone could return to work after a surgery, and they'd be in a trailer, or they'd be on the job site doing a light duty role in a Connex box, loading materials. The state doesn't allow that anymore, so our contractors, along with the hiring halls, are limited on to what we can do. So it all depends on the workers' comp law and how that changed. There is no light duty anymore.
Well, I just have to tell you that I'm an orthopedic surgeon and I'm an attorney.
Yep.
And that's news to me.
Yeah, for us, there's no light duty. If a worker in my local union, I represent the laborers union throughout the state of Connecticut.
I've been to the Workers' Comp Commission a number of times, and there's always a clamoring to get people back into a light duty status.
Do any of the other counselors have questions for the presenters?
I just got to make a quick correction. I wasn't in Local 40 for 30 years. I was 10 years non-union, and I worked on jobs that were supposed to be paid prevailing rate. And the contractor I worked for was sued 3 times, separate occasions. And when they added it up, he had taken probably about $10,000 or $15,000 from me. I never got the money back. I always missed that date by like sometimes an hour, I guess. But that's what we were looking to prevent. I want to thank you guys for listening, and I think it was pretty informative to all of us. I know we have some people back here. Mike Nahornik, who is Local 478. You can put your hand up. Everyone knows him. But there's local people that'll be working, and I think that's very important. And for me, never to have worked on a project that was municipal in my whole career in Groton, kind of speaks for itself. And hopefully we can get our Groton residents to work on a project.
Thank you, gentlemen, very much for coming out, and it was very informative.
Thank you.
I appreciate your time. Oh, I'm sorry, Councilor Overy.
Have you made presentations to the town, or are you in the process of trying to do that?
To the town? To this town?
Yeah,
This is
we did one
10 years ago.
okay.
Last time around, we had the approval of the building committee, and we came to the town council for their approval, and it wasn't approved.
It wasn't?
No.
Oh. Okay. So
There were some different faces in front of me back then. It was different people, but
I'm delving into something here that I know nothing about, but I assume that you're interested in some of the projects that we have coming forward.
Yes.
Okay. Just a reality
We
check
heard you
here.
building a couple schools.
Yeah.
Yes, we are.
Yeah, if a project labor agreement is approved by this body, which is the governing body of the town, then it goes into the RFP as part of the bid process, so contractors know that the PLA is in place. I'm not, has the CM been selected yet? Are you at that point yet where the CM is selected?
We're not there yet.
Okay.
Soon, hopefully, very soon. Thank you so much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Representative Dela Cruz.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, so we are on to 2018-0064, budget discussions with fire districts, and we have both Poquoonock Bridge and Old Mystic this evening. Poquoonock Bridge is first, so I see Chief is here, and Mr. Yuha and Mr. Ackley. Oh, yes, excuse me, if everybody could silence their cell phones, please. We had a couple things going here while the gentlemen were presenting, and it was a little distracting. Thank you.
What a school teacher.
You didn't hear it?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Multiple times.
Yeah. You go tell the school guys.
There were no women.
15 to 20 women. Big deal.
Thank you. Can you leave an extra for Nikki, please? Thank you.
Thank you.
Sean, are we on break or are we still on? Okay. So gentlemen, we're still on. If you want to get settled in, we can begin at any time. Excuse me, we're still in session, please? Thank you.
Hi,
Hi.
I'm Joe Winsky. I'm the fire chief at Poquoonock Bridge. We've prepared a presentation for you to give you an idea of what goes on in Poquoonock Bridge and how we meld into the community.
Would you just reintroduce your team, please?
Sure. Tim?
Deputy Chief Tim Driscoll.
President Ron Uhas. Alan Ackley.
These are our district board members. What we, at your request that we have prepared is just an overview of what we do during the year and the efforts we make to make sure we provide good public safety to the community, its guests, and do it at as reasonable a cost as possible. I provided you some information regarding some of the statistics relative to our fire district within the town. And before I get into all of that, I think what I'll do is I'll back up a little bit, and my operations officer, which is Deputy Chief Driscoll, has a prepared presentation for you to make.
Thank you.
So, just wanted to explain a little bit of what the Poquoonock Bridge Fire Department does in our mission. So, to make sure I didn't miss anything, because I'm a little nervous, I wrote it down. So, Poquoonock Bridge Fire Department's primary mission is to provide public safety for the residents and visitors of the Poquoonock Bridge Fire District, located in the town of Groton, from all emergencies, natural and man-made. Operating out of one station with 4 firefighters and 1 captain, the Poquoonock Bridge Fire Department protects 12.16 square miles of residential neighborhoods, apartment buildings, condominium complexes, senior housing, rehabilitation facilities, commercial and industrial occupancies, 5 public schools, 2 state parks, the Groton London Airport, 9 miles of Interstate 95, 1.5 square miles of City of Groton-owned properties, and 2.3 square miles Town of Groton-owned properties. Poquoonock Bridge Fire Department is a proud partner of the fire district-based town-wide fire service protecting the town of Groton. We provide and receive assistance as a partner within a pre-incident plan partnership dependent on the severity and size of the emergency with all fire departments that serve the town of Groton, putting the public safety as the top priority. Under the current system, there are times when it may appear there is a lot of fire apparatus at a particular scene. However, it would be impossible and impractical for each individual department to have staffing or equipment to handle every imaginable or potential emergency. In 2017, The Poquoonock Ridge Fire Department responded to 2,113 emergencies. The following is a brief description. 1,259 emergency medical responses to life-threatening medical events as part of a tiered response in accordance with the State of Connecticut Office of Emergency Medical Services protocols. The fire department's responsibilities include stabilizing the patient, assisting the paramedic in advanced life support measures, assisting the ambulance crew with packaging the patient for transport, and depending on the patient's condition, assisting the ambulance crew during transport to the hospital. 172 motor vehicle accidents. Fire department is responsible for scene safety, patient stabilization and extrication, helicopter landings, mitigating hazardous materials, and extinguishing fires. We had 44 hazardous material incidents. The fire department responsibilities are life safety, incident stabilization, and property conservation. And we had 53 structure fires or fires within a structure. The fire department's responsibilities are search and rescue, protect the exposures, confinement, extinguishment, and overhaul. The Poquoonock Ridge Fire Marshal is responsible by state statute for investigating and determining origin and cause for all fires within the Poquoonock Ridge Fire District. To accomplish the emergency responses, our dedicated firefighters and officers operate and maintain one frontline engine and ladder truck, one spare engine, a 16-foot inflatable boat, portable and mobile radios, self-contained breathing apparatus, testing and repair of approximately 5 miles of firefighting hose. Non-emergency services provided by the Poquoonock Ridge Fire Department include fire education, prevention, inspection, investigation, maintain more than 20 miles of fire alarm cable servicing 6 municipal fire alarm circuits that provide fire alarm protection for 130 Groton businesses, town schools, and properties. To improve public safety, in 2017, Poquoonock Ridge firefighters completed over 755 hours of training consisting of basic and advanced firefighting skills, hazardous material response, building construction, specialized rescue, officer development, fire code enforcement, fire investigation, incident command, emergency medical skills, active shooter, medical response with Regional Training Council, and the Town of Groton Police Department. It's a little bit of what we do on a daily basis.
He had mentioned some statistics, and if you refer to the document that I had given all of you, if you go down the list, it'll give you an idea of where the Poquoonock Ridge District fits within our community. One thing I will point out is I couldn't emphasize enough the importance of the partnership that we share with all our area fire companies. We work as a very cohesive unit and putting public safety at the front line of everything. And because of this relationship that we have, we've been able to function at a very reasonable cost as we can make it. The unfortunate part that we don't have control of is non-taxable properties. And as you can see, 54.75% of Poquoonock Ridge is not taxable, which is about $269,795,000 in taxable properties. We can't tax those properties. Those are all non-taxables. If you take a look at the map, all those colored areas are non-taxable areas within our district. Even though we're tasked with the responsibility of responding to these areas, and the fire service itself is the only mandated service for a municipality that's required to respond to state properties. So all that burden falls upon us. So we were always looking for ways to keep control of our cost effectiveness and yet do the best job that we can. And we did things like, we overhauled both the engines that we had. We purchased a ladder truck that was a demonstrator so that we could keep things in a reasonable. And other efforts that we've made is reorganizing the way we do business. We consolidated our efforts into the one building. We surplus some of the excess equipment, put it back into our apparatus, so we were able to get everything up to standards. We also applied for several federal grants, and to date we've received over $200,000 in federal grants in the last 2 to 3 years. It included an exhaust evacuation system, a self-contained breathing apparatus, a filling station. It was made by Bauer. That was a $65,000 project, all funded by the federal government. We're always looking for ways to keep our costs under control, yet provide the best service that we possibly can. I'm very proud of the firefighters. They always go to that extra mile. I'm proud of the mutual aid partners that we work with, and I think that we look for any help that you can provide us in whatever direction that you decide that you may, but I think you can see our concerns about the amount of non-taxable properties. Now, this indicated here does not include all of the properties that are in trust or in some of the other nonprofits that are out there. So you can see that though our area is fairly large, it's the amount of properties that we can't get any compensation for the services is quite high. So I wanted to just cover that in conjunction with what he had mentioned. This year coming up, we're doing a capital improvement on the building. It's got a flat roof. We're putting a peaked roof on in its place because we had to have an annual budget. It was a reoccurring item, repairing the roof every year, and it's starting to get out of control. So they're going to redesign. They have an architect redesigning the peaked roof. That'll be done hopefully this year, pending the approval of our annual budget, which will be next month. We continue to do the community outreach. It's something that we started last summer. And what we do is when the guys are out on a call, if they see kids at a playground or something, they'll pull in there and they'll bond with these kids so that they're not afraid when we do have to come to an emergency. Or we go to some of the retirement homes, and they've called bingo and spend time with the folks. They're still available, but it's part of community outreach, so people get to know us and understand that we're there for them, and it creates that bond. And we look at us as not the Poquoonock Bridge Fire District. We're part of the town. This is a partnership with you folks and with all our other mutual aid partners. So you're part of that mutual aid partnership. So when we make decisions, especially financial ones, we look to you to try to help us along and pull us all closer together so we can get to those goals that we want. And that's basically what I have to say on that.
Thank you. Do any of the councilors have questions or comments? Councilor Morosik.
Yeah, Chief, you're doing a wonderful job for the town, and I appreciate it. I know personally, you know, the work and the effort that you put in and the hours that you expend and the status of the equipment. I think it's outstanding. Along with the other fire departments, you know, you guys are certainly an asset, a jewel to the community. It's a shame that we can't give you more money from the pilot program, but you know, it's what it is. And maybe the council will relook at that issue sometime in the future to see if we could set a policy for that.
Yeah, over 54% of our district is non-taxable, so that puts quite a heavy burden on there's 42% of the electorate is in our district, and 54% of our properties are not taxable. So it's putting a burden on the people out there, and that's what I'm concerned with, is the people out there. That financial burden rests on them because of the non-taxables. And I think that's something I would really appreciate that the council could look into in the future.
Any other comments? Councilor O'Brien and then Zepari.
What do you think you'll have for your added mill rate this year for your?
Our mill rate, I've got it right here. And it won't be established until we have our annual meeting, and then it's the
Right.
following regular meeting, they set the, yeah, I got it right here. The projected mill rate, and we won't know for sure until the
Right.
end, is 5.97 mils, which is like 0.25 increase over last year, which was last year we actually had a mill reduction last year. So we're kind of holding our own. straight across. So it's a very minimal increase. But it's a lot of work. It's keeping track of everything that goes on within that operation. We do things that are as economical as possible, but the best that we can do. We don't sacrifice what we do to save a dollar. Our primary responsibility is the safety and public safety and doing the best job that we can. That's the paramount priority. But when we do things, we take that extra mile. Instead of talking to one vendor, we'll talk to 5. And that's exactly what I did with the roof project. We consulted with 5 different contractors and got the best that we could do, because we owe the people we serve that obligation to make sure we're doing things the best we can, the best bang for the buck, basically. But we will not compromise safety to save a dollar. That's not how it works.
Yeah, I have a few more if you don't mind.
That's fine. Councilor Sapari's after you.
What do you get any compensation back from the state?
Whatever you decide to give us through the pilot program is all we get.
Okay.
And it's something, it certainly has a bearing on what we get from you, has a direct effect on the taxpayers within our district. And because we are 42% of the town, it would have a bigger impact out of the taxpayer's wallet than if that money was kept in the general fund and is spread over, every single area. I'm not saying that we're asking for more than what they get. That's not my point. What my point is by giving us pilot, it has a better return on the dollar for the taxpayer than it would be if it was spread out amongst the entire population of the whole town. So each district has that same concern. So having pilot has a direct effect on the residents of any particular district. So when pilot is distributed, it's extremely important to the taxpayer, because it has a higher return for the taxpayer than it would be if it was just thrown in the general fund. That's what my point was. Maybe I danced around it a little bit.
Do you get, is there anything from Groton Utilities, anything that they do to assist?
Just a bill,
Just a bill for hydrants.
$100,000 a year.
Yeah, we have to pay rental on the hydrants.
You pay them?
Yes. 100,000 a year.
The center of your map, the tannish section,
Yeah.
that's Groton Utilities property.
Right, yeah, I noticed that.
And I apologize if I'm out of sort, but all these properties that are non-taxable, we're still responsible for.
Yes, I
And
understand that.
The past 2 years, I've been in the fire service for over 30 years, and I bought or acquired 5 bulletproof vests, 5 ballistic helmets. And if you told me that when I first started that I'd be doing that, I would have laughed at you. Our job has changed. Our way we do business has changed. And that equipment, that extra training, that investment is being made to protect your schools. And that's coming out of us. We're trying to figure out how to get those funds, how to get that money. So yeah, we have some pretty colors on that map. We don't get any money, but we have the 100% responsibility to
Exactly.
cover that.
Well, are you in a hurry?
Well, no, he's waiting.
Okay, I'll come back.
Councilor Sapari.
I was wondering, you noted that you have 54% of the property in your district is not taxable.
Yes.
Do you know what the percentage is in the other fire districts of non-taxable property?
I don't have that. I believe and this, I may stand corrected, but I believe 72.2% of all taxable properties for the town is within Poquoonock Bridge.
So there's basically 25% left for the other districts.
25% left of taxable.
Non-taxable property.
Of non-taxable.
We have 75% of them.
72.2. Rich, you have that figure, isn't it 72.2?
It's 72.2%, and I think the next one is about 18%.
I noticed that
And then
the
it goes-
pilot distribution that's in our our budget book is giving the vast majority of the money to Poquoonock Bridge. And I'm just wondering if it's proportional to the amount of non-taxable property that is covered by those. I guess the other fire departments haven't done the study that you've done and haven't presented the data to get a larger piece of the pie.
Let me make this clear. First of all, I don't want to see anything taken from those other fire districts. I think what we need to do, and one of the things that has to be looked at is most of that pilot money comes from the state of Connecticut.
Right.
But there was a time period where the town was contributing to that pilot fund to make up the difference for the town properties that are protected by the fire districts.
Okay.
And it does have, it is an increased burden. When you add up the number of students in these schools and the activities that go on, it does have an impact on all the districts and ours as well. But I want to make it clear that we're not here to try, I don't want anything taken from any other district. That's not what we're looking for. We're looking for some equitable, and we need it looked at to find out what could be done by the town. This building that we're sitting in, we protect. The town hall, the police station, the schools. There's 5 schools that we cover.
Yeah.
And that's just town property.
Right.
And that, I just want, if you could take a look at that,
I'd like to
honest
talk
look at
with you
that, it
about that.
certainly would help. And really, I'm not pleading it for me.
Yeah, I
I'm not
understand.
pleading it for I'm pleading it for the people that we serve, because they're feeling a pretty strong financial burden. And
Of course, you know, if the town were to put town money into it, it would be money they take from those people too.
Right.
And if they put a disproportionate amount into Poquoonock Bridge, that would be taking from the people that live in the other fire districts to funnel it into Poquoonock Bridge. But the other question I had for you was the fire district tax does not cover only the fire department. What else is covered by the fire district tax? Do you know?
Fire department.
That's all?
The
Nothing
fire
else?
department and the fire
In
marshal.
our district, there are one other district, I think, that does trash collection. And that's why one section of town has free trash collection.
Okay.
And I don't know, is that all Mystic or Mystic that has it?
Mystic.
I don't think it's free.
No, it's not free if they're
No,
paying.
it comes out of their tax bill.
Correct. Counselor Franco, Heed, Schmidt, and then Aubrey.
I was wondering, do you have any more volunteers?
No. We tried to get that going again, and when I first came 3.5 years ago, and we gave a very hard concerted effort. We did public announcements, we did pamphlets in stores. I went on the radio a few times. We did a TV commercial. We got one person to join. We worked with him, and then a year later he left, and haven't had any inquiries since. So it's really, and you know, it's a very difficult thing to revive when it has kind of expired itself. Years ago, this is how this organization started. It was volunteer. And I spent many years as a volunteer myself. So I understand the mentality, but people work twice as hard for half as much. If one parent is working, the other one's watching the kids. So to have somebody available and depend on that. We're doing over 2,000 calls a year. And what happens is when you get to a certain plateau of responses, then how much can you depend on that? Because you're in and out of there so much. Today was a classic example. We were in and out of that door all day long. And it's a big price to pay to do it voluntarily. And my hat's off to all the volunteers. Like I said, I was one for a number of years.
So, because it's one of the biggest questions I'm asked, and I have talked to you a little bit about it before, can you explain why you don't have trash and other districts do? Because this is a big question I'm asked when I was out campaigning. This is huge.
It's all the trash is paid for, it's just one district pays for it out of their fire district tax money. So, you know, their mill rate is paying for it, but their mill rate may only be at...
Could you please use the microphone? Thank
Their
you,
mill
Mr.
rate may only be at 3 or 3.5 mills. So if I don't know what it would cost exactly, but let's say it costs $500,000 more for the Poquoonock Bridge to do it. We can't do that because we're kind of at the top on the mill rate. Now, we can't say to Sawchuck or some other garbage, we're gonna put it out for bid. They're lucky that they get it picked up in that district, but their mill rate is still fairly low in comparison to ours. And a lot of the reason is because of the non-taxable property and, you know, we're in a very busy district, and I'd like to say publicly, you know, when I came in, this was turmoil 5 or 6 years ago. Now, we've got a pretty nice system down. We had a budget meeting in an hour. We were done with the budget because I know that Joe and Tim are gonna, you know, keep them numbers down. We can look it over. Where can we cut? And, you know, we're like every other entity. We finally started putting some money into OPEB. The firefighters are matching it with a couple %, but we're 18 million in the hole, just like everybody else, you know. But we're trying to overcome them things, you know. So we're starting, and we have a very good relationship with the firemen now, which we didn't have 5 or 6 years ago. Everybody's kind of at peace up there. But, you know, we've cut the staff, too. We had, like, I think 27 firefighters 6 years ago. We're down to 20. Them guys are working 50, 60-hour work weeks because we have a minimum manning. We have to have 5 firefighters on duty. So there's 4 shifts. There is no extra. If somebody's sick, it's an overtime deal, but it's still cheaper for us than paying for more firefighters. If we get so busy that we have to do that, the costs will go up drastically. And the council should know that, you know, like it was mentioned, what do we get from Groton Utilities? And this is the same for every fire district. We pay the town of Groton to have our tax bills sent out, about $29,000 a year. And then we're in an IT agreement with the town. And I'm not trying to say that it's right or wrong, but $29,000 is to mail out the tax bills. We pay the town. We used to pay them for plowing the fire station. So all of these things, you know, add up to a lot of cost. And again, the $100,000 a year for the rental on the hydrants, it's just, we have a lot of costs, and I think we've done a very good job, especially Joe and Tim, of keeping this under control. And back to the pilot money, since I've been involved, the pilot money comes from the state, and then Mark would say, well, we're gonna give you $80,000 from the state and $80,000 from the town. And that was what he would say when the money was, ballpark figures, I don't have, I think it's 74,000 was it or something? But whatever the number was, and the council has to realize that if the state gave no pilot money, the town really owes pilot money to every fire district in one way or another, because half of that property is the town's. I mean, our department is protecting everybody in town's kids that are at this high school. So long-term, this is something, and again, it ain't gonna happen this year, but I want the council to think about and be aware that there's just a lot going on in our district. We have a lot of property that we're not getting taxes on, and maybe the council should look at a proposal that all of the fire districts get so much pilot money from the town.
Councilor Heed.
Whether the state gets that money or not.
Thank you. Councilor Heed, Schmidt, then Moravsik.
Is your budget posted online?
Yes.
Okay.
I can give you, I have a copy here if you'd like it.
All right.
The budget hasn't been adopted yet. It'll be voted on May 9th.
And is that like one of your regular meetings? Like, when are your meetings? And
No, that's the annual meeting.
Annual meeting.
Okay.
In May.
Yes, was it the second Wednesday of May?
Yeah, we do have a meeting this Thursday night, right? Thursday at
And you're welcome to
7 at
join us.
the senior center.
We could share any information that you want. So.
right? That's like once a month on Thursday.
Yep, second Thursday of every month.
Counselor Schmidt, Aubrey, Marasic.
I wondered if you actually keep track of the different kinds of fire calls that you have. I know that you have to go to the retirement homes when somebody falls, and then that requires taking the fire engine, so many firemen, and they have to be there, and they have to take all their equipment with them so that they have it available in case there's a fire someplace else.
Exactly.
But what does that cost? I think that it would be interesting to find out exactly what is entailed in the different kinds of fires, like a brush fire for the state.
We have those numbers all broken down. We do have, by state law, we have to submit all of our runs to the state fire marshals every month. The numbers that I gave you when I was talking earlier, I went literally with the captains through the logbook and broke it down to what the calls were about. If we were to give you our report, you'd just see a bunch of numbers. It really wouldn't make too much sense, for lack of better terms. The EMS calls, I think it's important to understand that we go to life-threatening EMS calls. Someone that has advanced life-threatening issues, difficulty breathing, chest pains, strokes. Honestly, heroin overdoses have been through the ceiling, and it's been one of the most incredible experiences I've ever seen with our guys administering Narcan. We've been administering Narcan 2 or 3 times a week, bringing people back alive. 30 years, amazing. However, the fire engine goes as an R1 response to those calls because there's no way we could afford a rescue vehicle or a smaller vehicle and be able to staff it. And with 2,113 runs that we went on last year, we were literally going from call to call to call. We can't send them out in a smaller vehicle and have them run back to the firehouse. We're already, the delay is just it's unsafe. We'd be putting the public at a severe jeopardy to do that.
No, I realize that.
We do go to, if the ambulance is not available and there's going to be a significant delay, then yes, the fire apparatus would go, and it's to give care to someone instead of having someone laying on a floor for 45 plus minutes. So yeah, we do that. If a person does fall, it depends on how that call comes in. If it's a person that's just fallen out of bed, the fire engine doesn't go. If it's a person that has fallen and there's an extenuating injury from that, then we may go. But we of the calls that we don't go on are far higher than the calls that we do go on.
Yeah, the ambulance will go to calls that we don't go to. They have, this is part of the state mandated EMD criteria that the dispatch center uses. It's mandated by state statute. And they follow that criteria, and that's how we're determined to go. We can't be selective because then that's when you start having liability issues.
Counselor Aubrey?
You're talking about one of the things I was going to ask about the fly car. Have you, because I know other areas have them, they have a special vehicle that's prepared for most emergencies. And have you ever, I'm sure you probably have, but I'll ask the question anyways.
Sure.
Have you thought about what the cost savings might be if versus taking a small car versus taking out the ambulance, and in that way pay the person that would be driving the car?
Well, we don't run the ambulance. That's done by Groton.
No, I'm talking about when the fire truck goes out.
Okay, instead of using the fire truck? Well, here's the hazard with that. Maybe mechanically you might save a little bit, but the problem is if I go from where we are up on Long Hill and we end up going down here, and we have a medical emergency and we take that small vehicle and a fire occurs in the house next door, those two guys have got to leave, drive all the way back, and that's why.
I understand that. What I'm saying is I understand you have to have your 5 men and you have to be ready to go. And if you're being called to one thing, you're still away but you have your people with you, so maybe you could leave. But I'm kind of looking for you to analyze it, to kind of look at it as how do we make a change so that we have that fly car or truck or whatever it might be, and balance it so that we could in fact have a couple more firemen and, you know, able to put it together. Maybe it's not possible.
Yeah,
but
well, I think, and I know what he's gonna say, financially, it would require us to put 2 more people on to
Yeah.
run that other vehicle.
Yeah, I
And then-
understand that.
And now you're talking, it would be an exorbitant cost.
Yeah, just so that you know, our health insurance went up, like everybody else's, 25% this year. I think we put 400,000 into the retirement fund, I think is about the rough figure that is budgeted. So that's why we have cut the manpower back. And like Joe said, the wear and tear on the truck is minimal on the financial end compared to what it cost us to put 2 more men on, 3 more men on. And once you start having that, you need at least 3 or 4 guys. And we are a union department, so we have standards, pay standards, and everything that we have to go with. It's just, when we closed the one station, and Joe and Tim really did this, we send out 2 fire trucks to the call, and the captain goes in a car. If there's a fire somewhere and they're going on just a medical call, they can take one of the trucks and the captain and head out. And it is wear and tear on the equipment, but that is still far cheaper than the cost of hiring another guy or 2 guys and then keeping a truck up. So, you know, it's just, we're at $6 million, which is a lot of money for the poorest district to be paying.
I understand, and I've always thought that it was an inadequacy, the way that the people in the town have the taxes that they do, and the rest of the area have nowhere near as high. And I understand why it's happening. So it was just, you know, just a thought of something that we could look at that might be helpful in actually building your staff.
Maybe long-term, the town could look at other emergency service that was provided for the town by the whole town, so the tax burden is spread out through the whole town.
Yeah.
It's a fantastic idea. It's a great concept. It is one that we have looked at. It's just, it's cost. I hate to say it. I mean, it just can't, we can't do
But
it.
just, to me, and then I'll shut up.
I could talk like this all night long, so I'll just warn you of that right now.
Questions, so.
I'll let it be, please.
This is
Sorry,
Councilor
Rick.
Moravsik second and Councilor Heed again, so
I
Moravsik.
want to answer Council Zapiri's question, and also President Uhouse. Pilot funds, pilot money. It was basically established in the 1980s. The state gave $200 to the town. $100 went to the town, $100 went to the fire districts. From that $100,000 that went to the fire district, $7,000 was deducted and given arbitrarily to each one of the fire districts. So that gave $93,000 thereabouts in one pot, and $100 went to the town. That's the way it was for a long time, until about 2003, when there was some complaints made where the town kicked in roughly $150,000. So they brought the total to 243, 246, I think is in the book now. And that's what's divided up into the various pilot, the fire districts. Meanwhile, if we go back to 1980, when the state gave 200,000, and then all the way up until 2015 or so, 16, the state gave over $1 million. The town was still given $100 to the fire districts, rather than to splitting that 50%, 500,000 to the fire districts and 500,000 to the town. And this is where I felt that there was a problem. There was no policy ever written on this. It was just this is the way we do it. The previous finance director questioned it back about 2010, because he said, maybe this isn't right.
And councils, the previous councils and the previous town manager didn't want to hear this because it was taking money from the town and giving it to the fire districts. And this is the problem that we've had. This is the problem that I had trying to explain. There is no policy. So I think this council should have a policy rule on pilot funds, whether it's the 50% or it's 30% or 60%, but it should be a concrete policy written out so that everybody knows. Right now, this is the way it is.
Perhaps you could make a referral under new business tonight to
Yeah.
have us look at a policy. Counselor Heed?
I heard you talk about 5 people on a call. My uncle sits on a fire board. I don't know what the heck he's talking about when he talks about it, so I apologize. But maybe you could explain, what is a 3-platoon system, and is that something you've looked at?
3-platoon system, it's a couple different ways. 3-platoon, depending on the size of the department, areas could be sectioned out. Platoon usually is a shift, so there's 3 separate shifts. There'll be a 3-platoon, an A shift, a B shift, and a C shift. We run 4 shifts on our department. It's a 42-hour work week, which is what the national average is right now.
Yeah, they're 24-hour shifts too, they're not.
Yeah.
So they'll work at 24 hours and then they have 3 days off and then they're back for another.
We have 4 firefighters and 1 captain per shift. That gives us the ability to put 2 firefighters inside a burning building, 2 of them outside as backup, and the captain to be the incident commander. In effect, it keeps us with the OSHA regulations of 2 in, 2 out, and being able to do that. That's really the bare minimum we could do to keep not only the public but our firefighters safe.
And the system as we're running it, there's been studies nationwide about recovery after working a shift. And somebody said, geez, you get to sleep at night, but tonight when you go home, set your clock every hour, wake up and try to go back to sleep and see how it works. It takes a day or 2 to recover sometimes from a shift. It doesn't happen all the time, but lately it's been happening more times than not. So if you go to a 3-platoon system, the recovery time, they never make it up, injuries start to go up. And they've done studies nationwide, and that's why the fire service generally has gone to the 4-shift platoon system, 24/72.
Yeah, and I think now we get a lot more calls with these overdoses and et cetera at night. You know, when I first started, I thought maybe the 3 shifts was the way to go, but these guys are probably up an awful lot at night just on these overdoses and, you know, medical calls. It's just the whole environment and the need for the fire department is way more for accidents and medical calls than fires, but we have to treat everything equal, get the guys out and, you know, back, and I think they're a lot busier at night.
Councilors Perry, one more, and then if Atwater and Parker haven't had a chance to speak, if you have questions. We have Chief Richards also waiting to talk to us tonight. Yes.
2 questions for you. One is, you mentioned that, you know, we see a lot of different fire trucks at one fire scene because trucks come from other districts. You can't afford to have all the equipment you might need in one district.
Right.
Do you have all the equipment you need in the town?
Yes, I believe so.
There is a coordination among the districts.
It's the way I like to call it, it's like a ballet. Everything falls into place. Everything is predetermined before we go out the door. If we get a sign of a fire, we have a thing called a box plus. And Tim or myself or the captain will get on the radio and say, give me a box plus. That gives us an engine from the sub-base. It gives us a fast team from Old Mystic, a paramedic, and an ambulance, because we have a confirmed fire. And then as we progress through the alarms, we get more resources. And all we have to say, because we're concentrating on what's going on there, all we have to do is say, give me a first alarm, a second alarm, and a third alarm. And the dispatchers here have it on their computer, and the minute and I say first for that address, it's already there. All they have to do is call the people and send them out.
But there's certain equipment that you don't have in Poquoonock Bridge that they may have in Mystic or they may have in the city.
That's correct.
And there's nothing that you would need to fight a fire that is not someplace in Groton, is that right?
Yes, well, unless we got into some odd situation, but yes.
So there's
The
enough
other-
apparatus in town that the mutual aid comes into effect and everybody helps each other. So you help other districts help you.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
If it wasn't for this system, then our cost would be double, because we're not independent, we are interdependent on one another. And without each other, we can't survive. We're all good for that initial response. Beyond that, when it starts to progress, we need those resources.
That was a stupid question on my
No, it's
part,
not.
because I think you guys have considered things and you're thinking ahead on this. I have another stupid question for you. You have a problem with financing because so much of the property in your district is non-taxable. Why aren't we all one district in Groton?
That's been a question that's been on the table for a long time. There was a study done in 92?
Yeah.
In 1992. You might want to look in your archives and take a look at that, where they had broached that issue. But there are districts that cover more than one town. It would be a very difficult process. Not saying it's impossible, but I think that the flavor of it is, I think right now our system is working fine.
I know, I'm not
It
talking
really is.
about more than one town. I'm talking about one district for one town, so that we distribute the burden, the cost of the burden of so much non-taxable property that's located in Poquoonock Bridge amongst the whole town. And then when we distribute the pilot money, it would go to one fire district, and we wouldn't have to worry about one
Sure, I
section
understand.
getting its disproportionate share.
Right.
And again, if you were to do something like that, you have to look at it in the long term. It has to be a 10 or a 15-year plan. You know, we've got people, we just don't want to lay them off, or, you know, you have to work the plan now for 20 years ahead.
So-
When you consolidate, you just can't say, we're gonna shove everything together, you know what I mean?
Well, we
I would
cannot say that.
Yeah, I
We
would
as the
suggest to
council
you that-
cannot. It has to come from the fire districts.
Oh, yeah.
And the fire districts at this point have no desire to do so, especially the ones that are solely staffed by volunteers,
Right.
because it would be a cost increase for them.
Yes.
But again, that is something that perhaps we could look at if there's a referral made.
Yeah, I was
By
going to say,
Council
the
Brown.
initiative has to come from you.
Oh,
Right,
absolutely.
absolutely.
And the statutes, if you read them regarding changing forms of government, are very difficult. So it would require quite a high standard, but it is attainable. But I think what we have to do is look at the here and now. And we have a great relationship with our partners, emergency partners. And the point that I was making about two towns, we have fire districts, two of them in Groton that cover Stonington and Groton. That's part of their own district. It's two towns. So it's kind of, it's not as simple as just, it would take a lot of, quite an insurmountable effort.
Operationally, I've been involved since 1991, and there were times when, we'll say it was stressful. I cannot say that now. There's 9 fire districts within town of Groton. The fire departments, and I'll speak on my own behalf, I have never seen them work better together. Your town is very fortunate with the fire protection that you have, that what this group does is incredible. They're the most professional, highly trained, most dedicated group of individuals I've ever had the privilege to be around. I teach at the Connecticut Fire Academy. I see the training that goes on there. I see the training that goes on here in Groton, and the people that you have protecting you. I can tell you I would sleep very well at night knowing. And I put 5 of my guys, when I go home at night, I know that there's other people there that are going to protect them as well, and that is the mutual aid departments that we work with. They're fabulous.
I personally
very much.
believe you, and I want to say thank you to you for that coverage for us.
Yes, thank you very much for your service and for coming out tonight to share with us all the information.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have Chief Richards from Old Mystic here with us as well.
Thanks, guys.
Hello, thank you for your patience in waiting. Would you just introduce yourselves, please?
I'm Carl Strand, I'm president of the Old Mystic Fire District. Ken Richards, Fire Chief, Old Mystic. Yep. Now, we have not got any big presentation for you, nor do we have a lot of stuff to hand out to you. We are a different animal than Poquoonock Bridge. They are our very highly qualified neighbors, our mutual aid partners. We run the second highest number of calls in the town of Groton and the highest number of calls in the town of Stonington to Poquoonock Bridge. But we are a mixed organization. We are an organization with a half a dozen paid employees, paid firefighters, and the rest of our organization is volunteers. We're a very strong volunteer organization, and we would be coming here tonight with double or more of a budget than we actually have if we did not have our volunteers. So we have an annual meeting coming up next Monday night. We're presenting a $2,176,000 budget, which is $100,000 more than last year. But we are dropping our mill rate to 2.9 mil. We are adding one paid firefighter to our organization because of the increased number of calls we get now that Sonicare and Mystic is online. A tremendous number of our calls are related to elderly housing because we have Stone Ridge, Sonicare and Mystic, 44 Maritime Drive, and the Mystic Health and Rehab Facility. We're well equipped. We are well funded both from the town of Groton and from the town of Stonington with good grant lists. In contrast to Poquoonock, I will have to say that pilot funds are not a significant amount of our budget. So Chief Richards can expand on some of that, and we'll be glad to take any questions.
Thank you.
Just a real quick rundown. We're experiencing a major growth factor on the Stonington side of our district right now. I've been chief for 25 years this July, and we're going through our second growth spurt since I've been fire chief. So that's why we're looking at putting on another person during the day. But just to give you a kind of a flavor of the department, we have 35 active volunteers, 7 of us during the day that are full-time. We work Monday through Friday. Approximately 1,300 calls last year. Saturday and Sunday and holidays are covered by our volunteers. They man the station during the day, 8 to 4:30, and we pay them a stipend for their 8-hour service. Each night of the week, 365 days a year, from 6 o'clock at night until 6 o'clock in the morning, we have volunteers that actually stay at the firehouse and sleep in the bunk room. It's called a team night. It was actually my team night last night, and I had 8 volunteers in our headquarters firehouse that stayed there from 6 at night till 6 in the morning. They get paid for the calls they go on. Depending on what their training level is how much stipend per call they get when they go on calls. We have 2 stations, one on 295 Cohoe Road in Groton and the other one at 21 North Stonington Road in Old Mystic. We're doing, in today's society with the way the communities have changed so much with 2 people working, et cetera, I think we're doing rather well volunteer-wise. We had our monthly meeting, our volunteer monthly meeting last night. We voted in 3 new volunteers last night. We had 2 more people make appearances to become volunteers. And today, at about 2 o'clock this afternoon, we had a total of 5 new people come in to inquire about being volunteers in the Old Mystic Fire Department. So we're doing rather well on the volunteer side. Our district board is made up of all volunteers. It's a 12-member board, 6 from Groton, 6 from Stonington, president, vice president, clerk, and treasurer, which are our volunteers that meet once a month with us. Very good relationship with the district board. I think we do an exceptional job for like President Strand said, we're dropping our mill rate this year to 2.9. So if you look at the Groton side, town of Groton.
What did you say it was? I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
We're dropping our mill rate to 2.9, and it was 2.95 last year. But if you look at the town of Groton, our mill rate is in the lower end of the fire districts. But if you look at Stonington, we're the highest in Stonington. But if you compare us to Stonington, we're the busiest department in Stonington, and we're the second busiest in Groton. So it's very difficult for us in Stonington when we're making 1,300 calls, and there's other fire departments in Stonington are making 100 calls, 200 calls, 450 calls. So we're kind of like the Poquoonock Bridge in Stonington. We have a higher mill rate than everybody else, but we're also the busiest department in Stonington. But overall, the state of the Old Mystic Fire Department is strong at this point in time, and that's due to our strong volunteer side. Well-trained, when a volunteer comes in, approximately 800 hours of training that they have to do before they can really do everything that we need them to do. We have 4 people in a firefighter 1 class right now, 2 people in EMT class. So, and it's expensive. When a new volunteer comes in, by the time we train them and put the turnout gear on their back that they need and a pager, we're investing about $5,000 in each volunteer as they come through the door.
Other questions from the councilors? Councilor Heath, then Morosic.
Just a quick question. Is your fire station the one that's right next to the train tracks on the Stonington side?
No, that's BF Hoxie, that's Mystic.
Gotcha.
Our station in Groton is up on Cow Hill Road, just before Fieldcrest, right off of exit 89.
Thank you.
Councilor Morosic.
Chief, can you just give a little talk about that bridge? I know it's coming up in the budget session. I'd like to get your take on it because I think we're going to be looking at it soon.
The bridge on North Stonington Road is it's been out since we had the flooding back in 2010. It's still a high priority for us. It's a major safety concern. I've addressed prior councils and sent emails and paperwork. It's very difficult for us because we have to go to the Groton side of our district. That station has to go down by the Old Mystic General Store and take a right, and taking the right to go on 27 into Groton, it's a really bad intersection, especially with the parking on the side of the store. We've had numerous close calls there with people tend to run the stop sign coming from Groton. It got to the point where I actually installed a dash cam on the apparatus that goes out of that station just to record that intersection. And we've had numerous close calls there since the bridge has been closed in 2010. So it definitely a high priority for us, the bridge.
Town manager, please.
I just wanted to point out, it's not on the list, CIP list as recommended for funding. We lost the $600,000, half the price of that from the state, so we're trying to get that money back.
Any other councilors have questions? Councilor Aubry and then Schmidt.
What would you say the population is that you cover? Do you have any idea?
About 17,000.
17,000. Okay. And I guess going back to what Rachel asked, do you do garbage pickup?
No, ma'am, we don't do garbage. 26 square miles is the size of our district.
Okay.
Councilor Schmidt. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's right. I was just going to mention that the council, I believe, if I remember correctly, wanted to do the bridge last time, and it was the RTM that voted it down. So hopefully we can bring that baby back, if we can get the state money back.
It was voted down, sorry, because I was the chair of the Public Works Committee at the time, and Mark Ofinger said that the plans weren't well thought out yet. He didn't know the condition of the pilings underneath, so they needed to figure that out before they went forward, so.
Bad move.
Councilor Schmidt.
Oh, I wanted to thank you for all your comments about the the heroin problems that we are all encountering and throughout the nation, and I hope that there will be money available to find better solutions than we have today. But I know that you're taking the lead on that, and I want to thank you for that. But I know also that you're no longer able to bring the fire trucks in for maintenance at our maintenance division. And I wondered, I meant to ask Poquoonock Bridge too what they were doing, and I wonder what is happening with the fire trucks when they need maintenance. How do you handle that? Do you work together to find somebody who can do this for everybody and get a better price, or how is it being done?
Each district, after the town shut down, shopped around. When the town decided not to provide the service to work on the fire apparatus, that was a huge loss for us as a fire district, and I will go on record as saying it was a huge loss for the taxpayers in the town of Groton. Our maintenance budget, since the town stopped doing our maintenance, doubled. So when the town was doing our maintenance, we were paying for the hourly wage of the mechanic, and then we were paying for the parts, and then like a 10% charge for the paperwork to bill us, etc. Now we're paying over $100 an hour with everything else. So yes, our maintenance for our apparatus increased drastically over the last couple of years since the town decided not to provide that service.
Because the town was in a very tight position at that point, and it was just one of those things that they had to find some area that they could cut, and that was that. But where do you take the fire trucks now?
We use Shipmans over in Waterford right now.
Right.
But that was a good example of what Poquoonock Bridge Chief Winsky was talking about earlier. That was a really good example of all the fire districts working together closely, and came up with that idea and approached the town and asked them if they'd do that to save money across the board for all the districts. So that's just one example of how we work very closely together as partners for public safety in the town of Groton.
Right. Thank you.
You're welcome, ma'am.
All right, well, thank you, gentlemen, for coming out. I appreciate your patience in waiting your turn.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We are on to 2018-0090 FYE 2018 fourth quarter transfers, and Finance Director Landry is here, also waiting patiently, but being very well informed, right? And if you go in your packet, if you just, the page just past the minutes is where you will find the memo with the two alternatives. So we will need, after Director Landry is finished, someone to make a motion or move for a resolution for one of the two alternatives. Thank you.
Yes, this is the time of year. Is it working?
No.
Try again.
Okay. This is the time of year that I typically come to the council when we've looked at the budgets and we've estimated expenditures, and we find that those departments or functions that might be overdrawn for any unforeseen expenses that might have occurred during the year. And this year we have 3 functions that need a fourth quarter transfer: legislative policy, which is mainly due to the Charter Revision Commission for the ads and the legal fees. We have the town clerk, which was due to a retirement of a long-term employee. And then we also have executive management, which was some additional expenses related to hiring a new town manager. The charter provides the provision for fourth quarters during the last 3 months of the year. And that's what brings me here to request these transfers from you today.
So just for clarification purposes, these are not necessarily items that occurred anytime recently. These accrue over the course of the entire fiscal year, but they
That's
can only
true.
be paid out in the fourth quarter.
Yes, and what happens is when we put the budget together and everyone puts their expenditures together, we see that those that are, for whatever reason, are estimated to be over. And then I do go back and I look at all of the functions to see if there's some offsets to some of those cost overruns, and that has occurred this year. We've been able to offset some of them.
And there's, if you turn further, she has it all spelled out function by function as to where the money's coming from and where it's going at this point.
Yes, I should have said that. They would be contingency transfers.
Counselor Zepari.
I move that we authorize a fourth quarter transfer totaling $29,800 as requested by the finance director at this time.
So you're moving alternative 1 to approve the transfers and
Second.
refer to the RTM.
You refer to the RTM.
Zepari and Marosik. Is there any other discussion? Okay. All those in favor of alternative 1 and referring this to the RTM, referring it for resolution, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? So moved unanimously. So that will be referred to the RTM for a resolution. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You just want us to talk about the fire department?
2016-0256 Merritt property conversion. And
Make a motion to move that the members of the town council, town manager John Burt, and town attorney Eileen Dugan go into executive session pursuant to General Statute Section 1-206B for the purpose of discussing potential or pending claims and/or litigation concerning construction of the middle school on the Merritt property.
moved by Heed, seconded by Parker. All those in favor of going into executive session as per the resolution that was read, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? So we are now in executive session, and we will be staying in this room. Okay, we are out of executive session at 9 o'clock. And Counselor Aubry, you have a motion for us, please?
I do. I hereby move to support through general statutes 7-13 LD, I guess it is, ET, SEQ, and DEEP, the addition of a 35-acre portion of the King Konaski School property on the western edge along Birch Plain Creek to Boulder Height property as part of the transfer from the Merritt property of the DEEP conservation easement. Thank you.
I so move.
I so move.
Moved by Aubry, seconded by
Can you read that
Heed.
again? I don't want to read it out or whatever. I think there's a error.
Is there any discussion on this resolution?
I think we need to move forward in support of the
Oh,
school,
okay. Sorry.
Correct.
the construction.
Any other comments?
Let's get a school built.
Right, let's get a school building. Seeing no further comments, we will vote on the motion as read by Counselor Aubry. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? So moved unanimously. Excellent. So we are now on to item number 7, consideration of committee referral items as per the town council referral list. Do you have something tonight that you're adding?
Oh,
Yes.
gosh, my mind's gone the other place. What were we?
Put your paper out.
Just a second.
Not tonight? Okay. Anything else on
No, what we were talking earlier, and she said we should make a referral.
To the
Fire
pilot
pilot.
fund.
Under
Thank
other,
you.
so we are on other business. So under other business, Counselor Marosik, did you wish to make a referral?
I'd like to make a referral that the council review the status of the pilot money and come up with a policy so that in the future, other councils can hold themselves to that policy or change it.
Mr. Burt, you have that noted, correct? Thank you very much. Any other business? Counselor Aubry.
I'd also like to make a referral that I believe we had invited all the fire departments here tonight that affect Groton, and we had several that didn't come. So I'd like to I'd like to have a referral so we can go further with that, because I'd like information from all of them.
I believe the manager invited all of them.
Yeah, that's what I said.
Yeah, and
Right.
there's at least 1 or 2 more that are willing to come, but some turned it down.
Well, that's an important thing to know.
You will say the names.
So, So would you like the manager to extend a second invitation? Is that what you're asking? Because he's already extended the invitation to all of them. And some have just said, we're not coming, so.
Yeah, I think they, personally, I think they owe it to the council to come and have a conversation.
I will extend it again.
Thank you very much.
And I know there's at least, like, I think Mystic Fire plans on coming, and so there's some.
Great, thank you. Any other business? Seeing none.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Moved by Parker. Seconded by Perry. All those in favor of adjournment, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstaining? So moved. We are adjourned at 9:04.